Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Levin. You've got it tuned to the home stretch on 91.3 FM KXCI Tucson, streaming online everywhere at kxci.org. And today, live on YouTube and other platforms, in the presence of a wonderful artist named Raye Zaragoza, welcoming her back to the show. Her new album entitled Woman in Color. We did have her on the show a couple of years ago, and I was so deeply moved by her new record when I heard it. I knew that I wanted to have her back on the show, pandemic or not, welcoming her to our virtual studio. Raye, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me back, Hannah. This is so wonderful. I wish we could be in person, but this is great too.
Yes, I do too, but it's just great to connect with you in this way again.
Absolutely.
So the new album, Woman in Color, we've been playing it for a couple of months at the station. And it wasn't until I got the physical copy and looked closer that I realized that Tucker Martin produced the record.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from the Pacific Northwest, so I know Tucker. And I reached out to him and asked him about what it was like working with you.
No way!
And he had wonderful things to say. You will be happy to know. He said that he was really impressed with the fact that you write from such a fierce place, but that your demeanor in the studio was very inclusive, and you really let everyone know that they were valued each day, and that in fact you started out the sessions with a ceremony where you recognized your ancestors and recognized the work of the people in the studio. Can you talk to me a little bit about how that intention setting is important to you in the creative process?
Absolutely. Intention setting and like opening up a space is really important to me. It's something that my family has always done my whole life. It's something that is really big in Native culture. And so I'm part actually from Arizona. My roots go back in Arizona. I have Akimel O'odham roots. So anyway, it's a very a big part of the culture I grew up in, to acknowledge the space that you're on and like who came before you. And I've always felt that in order to create, I don't create alone. I create like with creator and like with my ancestors at all times. And so I need to make sure that they feel welcome into the space. So if I'm like coming into a new space like Tucker Martin's studio, I want to tell, like, you know, all of the spirits and the ancestors in the room or nearby that like that we acknowledge their presence and that we're here to serve them and do and tell their stories and, you know, do their space justice. And so acknowledging that I'm a guest, not only a guest of like my ancestors and those that came before me in that space, but also a guest of Tucker's and a guest of the musicians, and acknowledging that I value that they like made it there safely, and that they are like, I'm here with an open heart, and that I want everyone to feel safe is a huge, it means a lot to me. I remember like, even like I used to host parties all the time. And whenever like someone attended my party, like we had this thing we do where we'd announce like who was there. And so everyone knew. It's like, I just feel like with spaces, it's like, it's so important for people to feel seen and heard and to feel like they like occupy an equal amount of space in that, especially in a creative space. So I like to open up every day in the studio with like a land acknowledgement and a little bit of like a prayer to open up the space and let everyone know that that I'm happy they're there.
And it sounds like that served you well. You came out with a beautiful piece of art, and by all accounts, at least talking to Tucker, that it was a joyful, creative experience.
It was amazing. It was absolutely life-changing. I mean, he's like one of the most creative people I've ever met in my life. He's like this wizard of sounds, and just being able to create with him in his studio was like just this multiplication of so much energy, and it was amazing.
Wonderful. So let's talk a little bit about the first song of yours that we're going to hear. Raye has recorded a series of songs exclusively for KXCI, and we're going to share those performances and then talk in between them. So the first song we're going to hear is Rebel Soul. Can you tell me a little bit about that composition?
Yes. Rebel Soul is a song that I wrote about feeling like a bit of a misfit in the music industry. Being like a brown woman creating folk music, I've always felt kind of like out of place. And I felt like people are like, why do you make folk music? Or like, why do you write about the things that you write about? Like, why do you have to always write things that are topical? Like, why do you have to always like write protest songs? Like, why are the topics of your songs always have to be so controversial or so, you know what I mean? Like, I just felt like everyone was always asking me like, why? And I've always been trying to figure that out, and trying to figure out what my box in the music industry is. Like, where do I belong? Like, what's my genre? What's my place? How do I become mainstream? And Rebel Soul is kind of like my like reclamation of like, you know what? I'm not ever going to fit. So I'm just a rebel soul and I'm going to embrace that.
Excellent. This is Raye Zaragoza live on KXCI, songs from her new album, Woman in Color. This is Rebel Soul.
I moved out to the city, all the vultures followed me, preying on my weakness like it was a disease. A few times it brought me to my knees, brought me to my knees. So I walked into the desert, fighting through the heat, searching for the answers that I can't seem to see. Tired of who they're wanting me to be, wanting me to be. When the only thing you're left with are your torn and tattered clothes, when you find yourself wandering down a dark and lonely road, when you've got a feeling in your heart that no one seems to know, feeling like a complete unknown. I'm a rebel soul, I'm a rebel soul. I lifted up my head and I walked into the clouds, decided that this moment won't ever get me down. Nobody's gonna stop me now, gonna stop me now. When the only thing you're left with are your torn and tattered clothes, when you find yourself wandering down a dark and lonely road, when you've got a feeling in your heart that no one seems to know, feeling like a complete unknown. I'm a rebel soul, I'm a rebel soul. When the only thing you're left with are your torn and tattered clothes, when you find yourself wandering down a dark and lonely road, when you've got a feeling in your heart that no one seems to know, feeling like a complete unknown. I'm a rebel soul, I'm a rebel soul, I'm a rebel soul. I'm a rebel soul, I'm a rebel soul.
91.3 FM, KXCI Tucson. I'm Hannah Levin. It's the home stretch in the studio, the virtual studio, with Raye Zaragoza. Her new album entitled Woman in Color is out now. We just heard Rebel Soul. And the next song, It Girl, I have read a little bit about what you've said about this song. And it sounds like in some ways, this goes back to feelings you had as a young woman and kind of coping with Americanized standards of beauty. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. The It Girl is definitely like a tongue-in-cheek kind of like sarcastic song, but it definitely for me is like the most personal song on the record, and the song that I was hesitant to share publicly because I felt like it was telling this story that was embarrassing. As a young girl, I was like infatuated with wanting to be like a pretty princess, perfect Barbie, you know, and I felt like I could never be beautiful because I have brown skin. And I saw all the women and the girls on television, and a majority of them like did not look like me. And that was a really isolating feeling. When I was a kid, I couldn't really like put a name to it. I didn't really know why I was so insecure. I just knew that like I felt like my dark features were like the worst thing. And like, how do I erase them, you know? And, you know, in high school, I used to do all kinds of crazy things. Like I would like put lemon juice on my skin. I would like wear colored contacts. I would dye my hair lighter. Yeah, it's like really wild to think about. And it was like a super traumatizing time. And it's funny because I shared that story on like my Instagram when the song came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, like people are going to think I'm like crazy. And then so many people reached out and said I did the same thing. And that was wild. I really didn't think that I was going to get a reaction like that. And so it just really goes to show that these like standards of beauty are really tough on youth, and that representation and diverse representation in media is so important. And so if I can just exist, you know, as a brown woman in like a public eye space in a way where I'm just rooted in my truth and proud and confident, I feel like that's already something that is like radical. You know, that's already something that is like taken generations and hundreds, like it's been like generations in the making, like that empowerment itself. And so the It Girl is kind of like my acknowledgement of my like childhood desperation to be the It Girl, but then also acknowledging how it's all like bull, and I don't actually want to subscribe to any kind of like box or like typical beauty standard, and that like the It Girl or the It whatever is like exactly whatever you want it to be, and we get to decide what is cool and like what is it for each and every one of us. And so yeah.
Absolutely. Can you point to, do you remember if there was a particular time where you had an evolution of thought and confidence around that? Was it gradual? Did you talk to another woman who had a similar experience? What was it that got you to this more empowered and comfortable space?
It was definitely gradual. I'm still in it. Like I'm still like constantly a work in progress. I'm still like constantly like unlearning these, you know, all kinds of things. I mean, yeah, it's a constant thing. And I think that I actually spoke yesterday to a student of color circle at the University of Wyoming online, and we talked about this. And this one girl shared how she has the same feelings and she struggles with it every day. And she feels like her eyes are like so dark and like ugly, and she hates it. And I felt just like, oh my gosh, this is like exactly how I felt. And I told her, I was like, what empowers me is like, instead of thinking that I have to love myself and how like it has to be this like sparkly, shiny, like honky dory, like love, I kind of think of it as this like rebellion and this like radical feeling that embracing who I am is like a form of activism. Like embracing who I am is like a form of rebellion. It's something that like people have tried for so long to not have happen based on these societal structures of beauty and based on racial oppression and based on all of that. that has been pushing down on us for so long. And so for me, it's like exciting to think that my own self-love and my own self-worth is like a radical, rebellious action. And that every day I try to love myself more, it's like a way of changing the world. It's a way of paving the way for like less hurt and less harm for girls to come. And that if I can do better, then it's going to be so much easier for like young equivalent of Raye in like 20 years,
Yeah. Oh, well, bravo to you for pushing back against that idea. Yeah. This is Raye Zaragoza, It Girl, here on KXCI.
I could tell I was living in a world that wasn't made for brown-skinned girls. Just you wait, it'll be a turn. And in the mirror I would say to her, I could be the it girl, can't you see? I could be the face on the magazine. Paint me like a debutante, your prom queen. Pretty little it girl, yeah, that's me. Do you ever feel like everywhere you go, you're just an act in the sideshow? Just a friend, a second thought. It's time you give them everything you got. I could be the it girl, can't you see? I could be the face on the magazine. Paint me like a debutante, your prom queen. Pretty little it girl, yeah, that's me. You're better off just being yourself. Why don't you look into the mirror and say, I wouldn't want you any other way. But I could be the it girl, can't you see? I could be the face on the magazine. Paint me like a debutante, your prom queen. Pretty little it girl, yeah, that's me. I could be the it girl, can't you see? I could be the face on the magazine. Paint me like a debutante, your prom queen. Pretty little it girl, yeah, that's me. Pretty little it girl, yeah, that's me. Pretty little it girl, yeah, that's me. But I don't give a shit, girl, yeah, that's me.
91.3 FM KXCI Tucson. It's the home stretch. I'm Hannah in our virtual studio with Raye Zaragoza, celebrating her excellent new album, Woman in Color. We just heard It Girl. Raye, the new album contains a song entitled Run with the Wolves. And I figured when I saw it, maybe you had been inspired by a book. That's a safe, was that a safe assumption?
Yes. I have it framed like right over here.
That I love watching how that book, because I remember my mother in the 70s, like loving that book. And it seems like a new generation of women seems to discover it each year. Tell me a little bit about Women Who Run with Wolves coming into your life and how that led to this song.
Yeah. You know, my best friend, she suggested it, and it just like blew my mind. Like, it was so amazing. And I think that it, like, you know, what we've been talking about already was just like this reclamation of like who you are, and like this like radical rebellious feeling of like reclaiming your true self is a huge part, obviously, of Women Who Run with the Wolves. And this feeling like there's like a part of us, this like instinctual, like animalistic, like wild side of us that we keep dormant, especially as women, because society is always telling us to behave and to be nice and to, you know, to be quiet and to be sweet. And I've always felt like I've had to try so hard to do those things. And in Women Who Run with the Wolves, like this collection of myths and stories of all different, and especially being someone who's very multicultural, being Japanese, Taiwanese, Mexican, and Native American. I love how the book talks about different myths of like so many different cultures and understanding that there are so many common truths amongst different cultures, which is something that like resonates so much with me as a cross-cultural person. And so the book just like reminded me that my creativity lives within this wild side, and that in order to be my most creative, most like free self, I need to continue to do that work of dismantling all these ideas I have for what I'm supposed to be doing or who I'm supposed to be. And so the book just like set me free. It just made me feel like so like, like I can do anything, and like I don't need to follow this like cookie cutter way of life. And yeah, it's such a good book.
Excellent. This is Raye Zaragoza, A Run with the Wolves.
Feel the earth beneath my feet, it pulls me down. I heard the sound echo softly in the breeze, in the clouds. I hear them now. We used to be so free, get back to who we used to be. Leave the ground, look to the mountains, feel the air rush through your skin. It's the way it always should have been. We're running, 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 running with the wolves again. We're running, 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 running with the wolves again. There was a time when we were wild, moving fast, you couldn't hold us back. Then they came and stole our fire, put us in a cage we could never change. We used to be so free, get back to who we used to be. Leave the ground, look to the mountains, feel the air rush through your skin. It's the way it always should have been. Running, 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 running with the wolves again. Running, 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 running with the wolves again. Leave the ground, look to the mountains, feel the air rush through your skin. It's the way it always should have been. Running, 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 running with the wolves again. Running, 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 running with the wolves again. Running, 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 running with the wolves again.
91.3 FM KXCI Tucson. It's the home stretch. I'm Hannah, and so delighted to be live in our virtual studio with Raye Zaragoza, coming to us from her Long Beach home. And we are talking about her excellent new album, Woman in Color. Raye, I do want to ask you before we say goodbye, thank you for those 3 songs that you shared. There's another song on your album that means so very much to me. The song Red. When I first heard it, I honestly just sat down and started weeping, because you're talking in the song about an incredibly important issue about missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. The topic is obviously very, very saddening and enraging and important. But there's something also very gorgeous about the way you render your tone and the way that you approach the song. It actually almost reminds me of another song that another artist that your producer Tucker Martin worked with, Nico Case, did a song called Deep Red Bells that was about growing up in the Northwest and when young women were being murdered there quite a bit as well. There's something that you occupy that forgive me, I'm kind of stumbling over this here because I really am so deeply moved by this song. You hear the fear and the sadness and the anger all at the same time. You seem to be holding all three of those things there. And my understanding is that the song came out of a warning that was given to you at one point when you were at a conference. Can you talk to me a little bit about that warning and how that led to you wanting to create a song that had all those facets exhibited around this issue?
Yeah. It's thank you so much, by the way. It means so much to me to hear that the song resonated with you. It was another one of those songs that I think whenever I create something that I know is poignant or, is saying something important, I get shy and I'm like, this song is so triggering. It's so sad. I'm like, why this, like sharing this feels like, I feel like I'm going to just make people sad, and I know that that's why it's important. But I was in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, for a conference, and it was a very kind, casual warning. A man came up to me who was at the conference, and he was just very kind. He was like, "Sister," he's like, "where are you going?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna walk back." He's like, "Don't go walking alone at night by yourself." And I was like, "Why?" I'm born and raised in New York City. I'll walk at 4 a.m. alone. And he was like, "Well, they've been finding Native women in the Red River, so be careful." And it was just such an earnest warning, and a shiver went through my spine. And in that moment, I noticed my privilege, first of all, as a Native woman, who had not, experienced that as a kid, growing up where I grew up. I didn't understand the vulnerability of being a Native woman to that extent that I experienced in that moment. And after that, all the research I did of the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women across North America, especially off of Highway 16 and specifically in this river, the Red River, which is so insanely poetic because of the word red carries so much as a color and as a people, as Indigenous people, that color, and that word holds a lot. And it was just so painfully, poetically, heartbreaking hearing him say that. And I walked home with someone that night and then started writing that poem that turned into that song. And, missing and murdered Indigenous women, many people don't know that Native American women are at higher risk for sexual assault and rape and murder than any other race of women. Many people don't know that when women are assaulted or things happen, oftentimes on reservations made by non-Native people, oftentimes it can go completely no one will do anything about it because of the ways that laws are made. And so it's really a terrifying thing, and it's not talked about. And I really hope that future legislation and future bills can make it so that Native women are protected far more than they are now. And that, even looking up statistics of who's missing and when they went missing and all of that information is incredibly hard to find. I know Sovereign Bodies is working on a really great MMIW database. But it's something that is very much not talked about. It's a huge problem. And I really hope that we can get some legislation and some laws changed to really protect the vulnerability of Indigenous women.
I hope so as well. And I thank you for sharing your song, because in many ways that is art that also is considered labor. And so thank you for your labor around the song, for your work in raising awareness about an issue that impacts people in your community and your world as well. I think that's so valuable, and I really want to honor that. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here. I'm sorry that you can't do a proper tour for your album, but I hope that's out there in the future, and that we are able to welcome you back to Tucson another time.
I hope so. I can't wait for that. It will happen.
All right. For those listeners following along on YouTube, stick around. We are going to play that song that we were just discussing, read by Raye Zaragoza. I'm Hannah Levin. This is KXCI. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.